The woman on the hill is nailing boards to nothing. That is what the people of Harrow Creek say in October of 1903. They see Marta Voss climbing her own cabin roof, at first light hammer in hand hauling. Lumber like she's lost her little sense. The temperature is 22 below. Her breath comes in white plumes. Neighbors on their way to the feed store pull up to stare. Marta Voss is not crazy, she is. However precise, she measures the angle of the eave, and the gap. She writes numbers in a small leather book, the handwriting of a woman trained as a schoolteacher before she became a widow with a drafty. Cabin Ernie Halloran watches her from the road and shakes his head. Marta, what are you building? You fixing to store geese? She doesn't answer. She sets another rib. What she is building is something most people in Harrow Creek have never seen. By the blizzard of January 1904, they will know exactly what it is. They will know it the hard way. Marta came to Montana from Bavaria in 1879 with her husband, Carl. Carl had the shoulders of a draft horse and extreme optimism. Carl built their cabin like everyone else, single-wall pine. Planks, a stone fireplace, sucked heat up faster than it gave. It was a beautiful, elaborate way to lose heat. Carl died in 1901. From a broken wagon tongue. Marta sat with him, feeling how thin the walls were. Her children in Billings wanted her to sell and move. She had $73 and 40 acres. She wasn't going anywhere. She had $19 owed to the mercantile and a property tax bill coming due in April. She had to heat without burning 2 cords weekly or choose between freezing and starving. This winter wood cost money. Wood ran out. She watched Carl haul wood for 2 decades. He got older and slower, and she watched. She thought about a problem without a solution. The solution came from a book, a German engineering text her father had sent. It described the principle of the Luftdicht, still air trapped between surfaces, acts as an insulator. She had read it 3 times. She thought about her cabin roof. An October's freeze. She saw frost crystals on the underside of boards. Warmth passed straight through, bleeding like smoke. And she thought, what if there were 2 roofs not touching? 2 roofs with a gap between them, an outer roof to take the snow and wind, and an inner roof to hold the cabin's warmth between them. A layer of still trapped air 14 inches deep, sealed against wind, acting as a buffer, a thermal break, an invisible coat. She began planning in August of 1903. She spent September reading her engineering text again, figuring the pitch to prevent snow accumulation. She wrote letters to her brother-in-law in Billings, arranged for rough-cut lumber on the October freight wagon, Douglas fir framing, ribs, wide boards for sheathing. She spent 41 of her $73. She had 32 left. She looked at it long. The lumber arrived on October 12th. The temperature that morning was 18 below. Marta had already built her staging, a scaffold of poles lashed with wire to save money on rope. She had Carl's German claw hammer and a draw knife and a level her father gave her for a wedding. A woman who reads a level knows when it tilts. She starts with the ridge board. The new outer roof needs its own spine, its own peak. She braces it on temporary uprights, squares it with her level. Then she begins setting the ribs. The new rafters a 4-degree pitch. She measured it 3 times. The neighbors come by in 1s and 2s. Halloran stops again, squinting at the double structure. Marta, you'll crush the works when snow loads up. She explains the outer roof is designed to shed snow. He stares with the expression men save for mathematics. 2 days later, Tom Birch rides up with his man. Tom is a decent man, studying the structure. A long time the air between them layers. Marta, what good's air? She tells him about the Luftdicht, still air insulation. It traps heat the way a wool blanket does. Tom nods slowly. He doesn't believe her, but he's polite. Old widow's building herself a double-decker coffin. The man says the setbacks come in the 2nd week. She hasn't accounted for the triangular gable ends. Without them, the gap becomes a freezing wind channel. She sorts through salvaged timber behind the barn, old gray wood that Carl meant to use for years. She sorts 3 times to find straight boards. She loses 2 days. The 2nd setback is the scaffold. A lashing wire gives way on a windy afternoon. Marta is on it when it drops 6 inches. She catches herself on a rafter, scraping her palms. She hangs there with her heart hammering in her ears. She doesn't fall. She climbs down and rewires the lashing. Her hands bleed through the rest of the afternoon. She wraps them in flour sack strips and works. By the end of October, the outer framing is complete. She checks the gap in 5 places along each slope. It is consistent within ½ inch. She is satisfied. She is exhausted in a way that feels different, tiredness in the joints, the wind, finding every gap. She wakes in the dark, listening to the creaking, thinking about the invisible insulation that doesn't exist. Yet she has $32. All materials are purchased. What she has is what she has in. November, the mockery intensifies. The structure looks stranger than ever. A skeleton of ribs like someone tried building an ark on a house. His wife tells the story at the church social. The women laugh. It is genuinely difficult to imagine what Marta thinks she is accomplishing. Ole Gustafson, the valley's institutional memory, rides up one gray afternoon. He speaks with the authority of a man who has survived 25 winters. You ain't got enough wood stacked. Marta. She looks down at him. I won't need as much. He spits. That's what they all said. Marta has been measuring the interior temperature for 3 years. She has a small mercury thermometer, a precise German instrument. She records the reading in her leather book. 1109 times outside, 30 below interior, rarely climbs above 4 degrees. Her cabin has insulation barely better than standing outside. She knows what she is trying to change. Marta finishes the outer sheathing on November 18th. She seals the gable ends last, enclosing the air gap. 14 inches of sealed, still air. She climbs down from the scaffold. For the last time, the outer roof sits over the inner like a second skin. From inside, she imagines it will look like salvation. Takes the scaffold down, stacks poles, lights the stove. Outside 19 below, inside 41 with the stove lit. Then she closes the book and drinks her coffee. There are 3 cords of wood stacked by the house. Calculations suggest she will burn less than 2. She will have wood left in spring. She is 51 and has done everything she can. Now she waits. The first real test comes. On November 24th, a cold snap drops the temperature to 41 below. Marta builds the stove up and banks it carefully. She takes the thermometer from under her warm quilt. 57 degrees, she writes it in her book. Outside 41 below, inside 57. Above she has gained 18 degrees, not just gained. Held, it did not bleed through the roof into the sky. Held by the Luftchick, the invisible coat. She sets the thermometer down and looks at it. She makes breakfast and says nothing. Winter is not over. December passes quietly. Marta burns wood at a rate that surprises her. Less than half a cord. In 31 days, she patches a gap at the north gable with oilcloth. She checks eaves and stuffs them with tarred oakum. She is tightening the system, making it more perfect. On Christmas Day, Helena Birch brings preserved plums. It is warmer in here than I expected. Marta opens her book and shows her the numbers. Helena is quiet. You measured all this every morning. Marta says. Helena, Tom thinks it won't hold in a real blow. The gap is sealed. The wind cannot get in. Helena leaves. Marta writes the temperature and closes it. The storm comes on January 9th, 1904. The storm builds in the northwest. Dark and organized with that particular green-gray color Montana hands respect. She checks her wood supply, moves another half cord, and banks extra coals in the stove. She fills the water buckets and moves her chickens into the root cellar for safety. By midnight, 38-mile-an-hour winds howl, and the temperature is 27 below. At 3 a.m., 50-mile-an-hour winds howl against the outer roof with a deep, continuous sound. It is as if the storm is fighting with something that refuses to be moved in the heart of the blizzard. She lights the lamp and reads her book. Across the valley, Tom Birch wakes to the wind invading his attic. Tom sits with his wife and frightened children, building the fire higher. He has 4 cords stacked, but he is burning through them like paper. Ole Gustafson wakes to frost crystals on his window glass. He stokes his stove and does failing arithmetic. Ernie Halloran's horse barn temperature drops to 7 above Halloran, and his man frantically carry blankets and ice. They burn an entire pile of salvaged fence lumber. They burn it all on the ridge. Marta's cabin interior is 52 degrees. She has added wood twice. Since midnight, only twice outside is 51 below. The roof carries huge drifts inside the cabin. It is 52 above, a difference of 103 degrees. She writes the data in her leather book. 103 degrees between the world outside and within. The stove is burning steadily, not roaring like October's first chill. The heat she puts in is staying where she puts it, held by the Luftchick, the invisible coat over the house. She closes the book, refills her coffee, and listens to the storm. The storm argues with her roof. The roof does not answer. The storm holds for 4 full days at 40 below. The valley bottom is locked under 10-foot drifts. Day 2, Marta feeds her chickens in the root cellar. She comes up through the trapdoor and looks outside. Tom Birch's chimney is smoking heavily. Desperately, Gustafson's chimney billows. Smoke, fuel alone, cannot solve it. Third day morning, the wind drops for a momentary calm. She passes neighbor Amos Pryor, and they exchange a wave. He looks cold from a distance, bundled in heavy furs. She is wearing her house coat and no hat. She goes back inside and adds wood to the stove. Wood consumption is less than a single ordinary day night, for the wind drops from 60 to 20 by morning of the fifth day. It has stopped. The sky is the blue that follows great violence. Marta opens her door outside. 37 below. She looks at the valley. At the white geometry, her cabin is intact. The outer roof shed snow exactly as designed. She looks down the ridge toward Tom Birch's farm. Figures are moving. She looks toward Gustafson's place. Smoke, still rising thin now. She goes inside. 49 inside. 37 below. Outside, an 86-degree difference with the stove banked. She makes breakfast and eats it slowly. She was not cold. Not once. In 4 days, Tom Birch comes on snowshoes picking his way. He looks older than he did before the storm. He looks at her cabin, then at her face. Humility. Something she has not seen from him. How much wood did you burn? He asks. She brings the book out and stands in the cold columns of numbers that tell the story of the roof. I burned 2.5 cords. He says. She nods. I've got 1.5 left for winter. She nods again, letting the numbers do the talking. Helena would like to see how you built it anytime. Marta says. He nods and picks his way back down the ridge. She begins writing down the construction details and measurements. 2 days later, Ole Gustafson rides up. This takes something from him. She can tell he looks at her double roof for a long time. I burned 3 cords, he says, in 4 days. She says nothing ain't got but a cord remaining. He sits at her table with his hat in hands. The air, he says, still air. That's the whole of it. That's the whole of it. Marta says still air is better. Moving air transfers heat. Still air holds it. The trick is making it still, sealing it on all sides. He turns his coffee cup. He is 71 years old. I was wrong about you, he says. You were working from what you knew, she says. He stays another hour asking questions, and she answers. When he leaves, he shakes her hand in spring. Marta Voss counts her remaining wood. 1 3/4 left this year. She will sell the extra cord. She adds it to the $32 in her tin. She sits with the door open, sunlight flat and gold. She turns to her construction details and adds a note. The principle is simple. The labor is not fur, feathers, and winter will do the same thing. They stand between the warm thing and the cold. We forgot to ask how warm things stay warm. She closes the book. Outside, the creek is running with snowmelt. Meadow brown. Tom Birch measures fence posts. Gustafson's smoke is peaceful. Neighbors who laughed watch her sell that extra wood. They did not laugh. Marta writes the morning number. 41 degrees. She sets the book beside her father's engineering text. 2 books that together held the invisible coat. She puts the kettle on. Winter melting into the ground, slow and ordinary. The double roof stands quiet against the April sky. It kept her warm. That is the whole of the story. That is enough.